In this video, we're talking about what to do when you are trying to do some division problems and you have decimals in your problem. First, let's just talk about the parts of a division problem. So we have the dividend, the divisor, and the quotient. The dividend is the number that's getting split apart. The divisor is the number that we're using to split it. And then the quotient is the result. So when we set up a division problem, the dividend, the number that's getting split apart, goes on the inside. The divisor, the number that we are using to split the dividend, goes on the outside. And the quotient, our result, will end up on top. So let's talk about what to do if there is only a decimal in the dividend, and that's it. So when we see a problem where there's only a decimal in the dividend, nothing in the divisor, all we do is just bring this decimal straight up into my quotient and then divide like we normally do, and just ignore the decimal for the rest of the problem. Just make sure you keep everything lined up. So you could create a ratio table off to the side to list your multiples of 2, unless you already know them. So how many times does 2 go into 7? 3 times. 3 times 2 is 6. Subtract. We get a 1, so we bring down the 5. How many times does 2 go into 15? 7 times. 7 times 2 is 14. Subtract, we get 1. Bring down the 4. How many times does 2 go into 14? 7 times. 7 times 2 is 14. All right, sorry, I had to back it out so we could see a little bit better. When we subtract, we get 0. Bring down the 6. How many times does 2 go into 6? 3 times, which is 6. And when I subtract, there's nothing left over. All right, I ran out of room there at the end. That's okay, I was able to finish. So, because we brought the decimal straight up into the quotient, we now know where our decimal should go in our quotient. So, when you're looking at your answer to see if you've got the decimal in the right place, if you've just brought it up, look and see how many decimal places were in our original dividend. So we had 2 numbers before the decimal. So in my quotient, I should have 2 numbers before the decimal. 2 numbers after the decimal, 2 numbers after the decimal. If you end up with some number that has all of these digits, if it has more digits than your dividend, you've done something wrong. So quick, easy check. 2 numbers before the decimal, 2 numbers before the decimal. 2 numbers after, 2 numbers after. So when there's only a decimal in the dividend, bring it straight up and then just divide. So let's look at this problem. I only have a decimal in my dividend, nothing in my divisor. So I get to just bring that decimal straight up into my quotient. And I'm just going to divide like I normally do. How many times does 5 go into 4? 0. I get 4. Bring down the 9. How many times does 5 go into 49? 9 times, which is 45. Subtract and I get 4. Bring down the 6. How many times does 5 go into 46? 9 times. 45. Subtract and I get 1. Now, on this one, when I was doing my division, I end up with a remainder. I know we've talked about before in other problems, if you have a remainder, you can make it a fraction up here, but it doesn't make sense to make this a fraction. What we can do is in our dividend, we're already into the decimal place. This is the tenths place, we have a 6. This is the hundredths place, and in the hundredths place we have nothing. Or we could also look at it as a 0. And in the thousandths place, 0. 10 thousandths, 100 thousandths, and we can just keep going forever and ever and ever. All of these zeros. So if when I'm doing my dividing, if I end up with a remainder, I don't have to stop. I can just, it's called annexing a zero. I can annex a zero and bring it down. We have infinity zeros for us to use that we could just keep going. So I subtracted and I brought down, so I don't have to put anything up here yet because I haven't divided. How many times does 5 go into 10? 2. Subtract. There's nothing left. So my answer is 9 and 92 hundredths. So you can do my quick check. Number before the decimal, 2. Number before the decimal, 2. After the decimal, 2. After the decimal, 2. So that helps me know that my numbers are all lined up correctly and I've got the decimal in the right spot. Now let's talk about what to do if I have a decimal in the dividend and the divisor both. Well, we can still do our regular division, but first we need to make this into a whole number 4. So I can make this a whole number 4 by shifting the decimal one place value by multiplying by 10. But in order to keep my problem equal, I have to also shift the decimal in the divisor once by a power of 10. And now because I've shifted both of them the same amount, I have kept it all equal and my answer will still work. So I'm just going to erase these extra lines and the original decimals so they don't confuse us. And then I'm just going to bring that decimal straight into my quotient. And now just divide like I normally do. 4 goes into 8 twice. Bring down the 6. 4 goes into 6 once. 1 times 4 is 4. Subtract and I get 2. Bring down the 2. 4 goes into 22 5 times, which is 20. Subtract and I get 2. Now I have a remainder. I'm not able to divide it evenly yet, so I can just bring down some of the infinity zeros that are after this decimal. I have a 2 in the ones place. Well, in the tenths place, I have nothing, which is just 0. So I can bring down that 0. 4 goes into 20 5 times. There's nothing left over, so my answer is 215 and 5/10. So again, remember your quick check. 3 numbers before the decimal, 3 numbers before. 1 number after, 1 number after. It's a really easy way to check to see if you've got your decimal in the correct place. Okay, now again, we have a decimal in the dividend and a decimal in the divisor. Before I can start dividing, I need to shift my divisor to make it a whole number. So this time, I don't just shift the decimal once, because if I just shifted it once, my new number would be 2 and 5/10, and that's not a whole number yet. So I need to shift it one more time. So I've multiplied it by 10 twice. So now it's really a 25. And because I shifted the decimal here, I have to shift the decimal in my dividend the exact same amount. So I shifted once twice, so I need to shift once by multiplying by 10. And I need to shift one more time by multiplying by 10. So now my decimal is here, but what goes here? Well, I have to put a placeholder 0, because remember, we've got infinity zeros after our number. So if we have shifted the decimal, it just means we've shifted the number up by a place value, and we now have a 0 at the end. So I'm going to erase these extra marks. And I'm just dealing with 25 decimals at the end. And now it's really 7,630 divided by 25. And I just start dividing. 25 goes into 7 0 times. Into 76 3 times. Into 13 0 times. Into 130 4 times, which is 125. And when I subtract, I get 5 left over. Now I've got a leftover, and I'm at the end of my number. Just like before, I have infinity zeros after my decimal. But because I'm going to now drop down one of these zeros, they're kind of imaginary zeros hanging out there. Well, maybe not imaginary, but more hidden. They're hidden zeros until we need them. But because I'm going to drop one of those down, what I have to do is I have to bring that decimal up to keep everything lined up and in the correct place value. And I know that 25 goes into 52 times. And when I subtract, there's nothing left over. You can't really see that down there. But I don't have a remainder. And so I've been able to divide this. And my answer is 304 2/10. So I can use my quick check. 4 numbers before the decimal. 4 numbers before the decimal. The 0 counts. 1 number after the decimal, 1 number after the decimal. That lets me know my decimal is in the correct place. And because my answer is my quotient, my answer is the exact same amount of digits as my dividend, I know that my work has been correct. Good luck with dividing decimals. I hope this helps.